Hello and welcome to episode number 20 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and wow, do we have a special show for you today. I'm throwing my usual intro out the window for this one because this is not just another episode. This one deserves an intro all to itself. Joining me this week is someone related to two NHL Hall of Famers. Not only that, they're his dad and his granddad, the grandson of the legendary Bobby Hull and the son of one of the most prolific scorers in the history of the league, Brett Hull. Instead of wanting to score goals, he chose to be the man to stop them from going into the net. Joining Chel Squared this week is the man, the myth, and the legend, Jude Hull. Jude, what's up?
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. So before we get into the super nitty-gritty here, you're in the process of doing a 21-day no complaint challenge. What's up with that? Why? What made you do that kind of thing?
So it's, I don't know, it's not really a long story, but just something that I've kind of, it's been addressed to me for pretty much my whole life that I kind of am a bit of a complainer. So just kind of starting a new phase of my life. I just moved out to New York and kind of going through the growing pains of living away from home. And so I just figured I'd try this new challenge, and it's kind of been fun and just something new to do, and excited to see the results.
It's fair. So you are a goaltender by trade. What made you want to be between the pipes? Your dad was a winger, your grandfather's a winger, but you call the crease your home. Was it a pride thing to stop a snipe from your dad, or what's the story here?
So it really had nothing to do with my dad. So when I was living in Dallas, when my dad was with the Stars, my favorite player watching was always Eddie Belfour. And so when they were in the playoffs, I'd watch the games and just kind of recreate all the saves that I'd watch. And it kind of grew into something. And when I moved out to Minnesota, I actually didn't start out as a player, or as a goalie. I started out as player and I hated it. I was maybe just a little bit of a lazy kid, but and at that age, goalies didn't skate much. And so I kind of strapped on the pads, and it just kind of grew from there, I guess.
So take me back to the beginning. You were born in 94, which, by the way, as a Rangers fan, is a great year. Your dad that year scored 97 points in 81 games for the Blues. You were 5 years old when he won the Cup in Dallas in 99. He not only won the Cup, he was the one that scored the controversial goal to win it all, of course. Do you remember anything from that night or that summer, that celebration period?
So I don't remember a whole lot from the actual series or just the playoffs in general. Like, I remember my mom would tell me that she'd ask me if I wanted to go to the games, and I'd tell her no, I just wanted to play street hockey with my friends in the neighborhood. But we had the Stanley Cup party actually up at our summer home in Duluth, Minnesota, and one of the cooler experiences that I can really remember, and one of the first real good memories I have is we played baseball, and the cup was second base, and it was just a surreal moment. And looking back on it, I was a little probably naive and didn't really realize what a special moment that was. Granted, I was a pretty young kid at the time, but yeah, it's looking back on it, it was just kind of a surreal moment that not a lot of people get to experience.
In your unbiased opinion, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the goal. Should that have been a goal? In your completely, obviously, totally unbiased opinion here, is that a good goal?
Yeah, that's a good goal, and it cracks me up that Buffalo fans are still hung up on it. It is. Every post that has my dad on in any NHL social media platform, it's all no goal, #no goal. And I kind of grew up with my dad kind of embracing it and kind of turning it into a joke. Like, he'd order special custom shirts with a skate in the crease saying it was a good goal and stuff like that. So he's always playful with it. But it's I don't know, it's just kind of funny. 20 years later, almost 20 years later, it's still a topic of discussion. So it's But no, it definitely was a good goal.
Well, the Sabres never made the final after that, and then the Stars went to the final again, and they lost to the Devils. So for the Sabres, for a team that hasn't been back since, it's a big deal for them more than it is for the Stars.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I can understand it from a Sabres point of view, but from an unbiased point of view here, it's I definitely say it was a good goal.
Your dad retired 5 games into his 19th season. That's incredible. As a member of the Phoenix Coyotes in October of 2005, you were around 11 years old. In the next year, in 2006, the Blues retired his jersey, and 12-year-old you is standing next to him along with the rest of your family. What was it like for you to grow up in such a hockey-rich family? That hockey is, you live and breathe the sport. You're always around it. What was it like for you to be in that environment 24/7?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it was all sunshines and rainbows. It was there was some tough times, like growing up in Minnesota, playing hockey, and kind of growing up in both my grandpa and my dad's shadow. Those were huge shoes to fill and huge names to live up to. So it was tough in that regard, but I'd say it kind of ingrained further my love for the sport, and I kind of just grew up fascinated with all things hockey. So I think that kind of helped my personal hockey career, and that I took everything with a positive attitude, and just my pure love for the sport kind of prolonged my hockey career, because it definitely wasn't all skill, that's for sure.
So, you say that it wasn't easy. Obviously, it's never easy to follow 2 Hall of Famers like that. But what would you say would be the challenges that you faced growing up? Because again, your dad was a Hall of Famer, your grandpa's a Hall of Famer, and you growing up obviously you felt like you had to follow in that regard. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, my dad he was awesome about it and never really pushed anything on me. I was playing hockey because I loved the sport, but I do have a good story about just what it was like growing up with the last name that I have. So after my senior year of high school, my goalie coach got me a tryout for the Odessa Jackalopes in the North American Hockey League. And before they had even seen me play, they were writing an article on me on how I was going to be the next guy to replace. And I think the goalie was Connor Hellbuck,
wow,
who was just leaving that organization. So they were already comparing me to an NHL draft pick. Really, the article was more about my dad than anything, but they were still they had all these high expectations for me. And when I didn't make the team, it kind of it doesn't feel great. And that was kind of the long and short of my career, was just not quite living up to the expectations. And it was definitely difficult. You kind of always feel like you let the family name down, but I feel like I did all right for myself as a 5'9" goalie playing Division III hockey with a great school, and I think I took what I was given and ran with it, and I got no real regrets.
So, like you said, you're not the tallest goalie in the world. You played Division III for St. Olaf State. Take me through your goaltending experience in college. What obviously, some of the players on the team knew who your parents, who your dad was, who your grandpa is. Some of the opponents probably knew as well. What was that experience like? Because it's so unique to. I mean, I can't recall pretty much anyone that has that same experience as you. So, you growing up, you being in the crease, what was that like for you?
It was cool. Like I got a ton of attention, and when you're a young kid, you kind of eat all that attention up, and all the questions would always be like, what's it like having Brett Hull as your dad, or did he ever shoot on you when you were a little kid, and just stuff like that. And in actuality, I didn't even really grow up with my dad. Like, my parents were divorced when I was pretty young, and I grew up with my mom in Minnesota. And like I said, he didn't push anything on me, so I was kind of just doing my own thing. And it was tough when I was kind of growing up and realizing how big of a deal my dad and grandpa were, I'd kind of the opponents started realizing it as well. So I would get chirped for being in a lower league than most people thought I should be. So it was kind of a running joke with that, and so I kind of learned to take all the chirps that came with the last name. But when I got to St. Olaf, things kind of changed for me. I was always called my mom always said I was a late bloomer, and sort of a lot of my coaches in high school and just youth hockey, they always said I was going to be a late bloomer, and I didn't play a single game my freshman year. Sophomore year, I played a little, but not as much as I would have liked. And our junior year, we actually got Mike Eves as our coach, and I developed a really great relationship with him right off the bat. And that season, I had the best season of my career. And so I credit a lot to him. He developed me well and kind of pushed the buttons that needed to be pushed. My last 2 years at St. Olaf were great, and I played a lot, and it was just an awesome experience, and I'm so thankful for it.
You mentioned Mike Eves as being one of the coaches that you really meshed with well. What are some other names that really got you to where you are today? What names are popping up in your head that you think back and you're like, oh yeah, this guy or this person really helped me along the way?
So I definitely have to say Joe Dietzich. He had a brief stint in the NHL. Was Mr. Hockey coming out of Minnesota high school hockey, or Mr. He was my high school coach. He would train me in the summers, and he kind of gave me the whole spiel about having to actually put in the time and effort in the summers, and he really helped me progress and grow as a not only a player but as a person. And I credit a lot of my work ethic towards him. Obviously, my dad was a huge a role model. I would always look up to him, and he gave me obviously the gigantic shoes to fill. But I don't know, just growing up in Minnesota, there were so many great players that I played with that would later go on to have awesome Division III, Division I careers. Some are still playing in the pros right now. So growing up in Minnesota, you're spoiled with such great talent, whether it be players or coaches, and it definitely had a huge impact on my growth as a player.
You obviously had some great coaches by your side. Was there maybe like a player that really connected with you, that you really connected with, maybe throughout your career? Maybe it was Brett's teammate, or what's a name that you really you look back and you say this this teammate or Brett or my dad's teammate really was really great.
Well, so growing up with my dad, I got to meet so many great players, not only great hockey players, but great people. I'd have to say definitely one of them would be Brendan Morrow. Him and my dad are great friends, and I would get to spend a lot of my summer with him and my dad. And I'd say he's one of the all-time greats. Wayne Gretzky's another guy that I got to know fairly well, and I've developed a great relationship with his kids, and he's again an all-time guy, and it's kind of nice to see like a lot of those high-end celebrity athletes. You kind of would imagine they're not going to be the greatest of people, but Wayne is truly one of the best guys I've ever met. Let's see. There haven't been really many I haven't gotten along with. Like Kelly Chase, maybe not the high-end hockey player, but another good friend of my dad's who was kind of played a pivotal role in his success in St. Louis, with him being his kind of personal bodyguard. He's always he's always looked after me pretty well, and like I said, I grew relationships with all these guys as kids, and I've been pretty spoiled to have met the players and people that I've met through my father and grandfather.
So what's that like then? When you meet someone like a Gretzky for the first time, like a Brendan Morrow, what's the what are you thinking? What's the first reaction kind of like for you? I'm sure it's different now because you've met so many throughout your life. But let's say you meet someone new tomorrow. You're going to the Pittsburgh Penguins and Islanders game in Brooklyn on Thursday. Let's say you meet someone new there. What's your first reaction when you meet a player or a name like that?
Yeah. So growing up, I would kind of see it all the time with my dad, with people coming up to him, and you get irritated of it at first, and then you kind of just get a little desensitized by it. And so when I first started meeting all these people, I kind of went into it with that experience in mind. So I didn't ever want to be too. I didn't want to come off too strong or anything, so I kind of just treated them as normal people. And then growing up, my dad would kind of tell me how impressed he was with that and how much they actually really appreciate that. So I've kind of gone into all those encounters with just obviously the big names. You can't not kind of make that a big deal of, but like. Right. I usually go into it just pleasure to meet you, and I don't really mention anything about their careers or anything. And just like I said, growing up with that as a part of my life, I kind of know can be kind of irritating. So I learned at a young age to kind of approach that with a little more respect than most people, I guess.
For sure. Well, what's next for you then? You said you're back in New York City, where both of us interned at the NHL in the summer of 2017. I mean, I met Pat LaFontaine, I met Kevin Westgarth, and it was tough for me to kind of control. I know how to handle myself, but I was kind of fanboying on the inside a little bit because I'm such a hockey crazy fanatic that, meeting Pat LaFontaine and meeting Kevin Westgarth was such a huge deal for me. But you've done it so many times like you said, you're kind of desensitized by it. So what are you up to in New York City now that you're back in the Big Apple?
So I'm actually back with the NHL. I'm working in their events department. More on the entertainment side of the events. So I'm involved with all the big name events, the All-Star Game, Winter Classic, Stadium Series. So it's been going well so far, and I'm just kind of ready for the event season to start picking up. And it's funny you say you're kind of holding back the excitement with running into like Kevin and Pat in the office. And it's funny, me being just the huge hockey nerd that I am, I genuinely get excited when I see like the Dan Rosens and the EJ Radicks, and I just like kind of fanboy out about them. Just growing up, like my favorite channel is the NHL Network, and just getting to chit chat with them was really cool for me, which is kind of funny just because of all the people that I've gotten to meet, and those are the people I'm getting excited about. It's
really cool to just kind of talk to people that you might not really talk to often if you're not in that kind of world, if that makes sense. So I love Pat, and I love Kevin, and I love everyone in that office as well. I mean, Pat, we interned there for what, 3 months or so, and whenever I saw Pat or Kevin, I kind of got excited just because both of us are super crazy about hockey, and to see a couple of those guys that Pat's obviously an American legend. Kevin, I watched when I was a little kid, so that was something big for me as well. Even Kevin Westgarth's like 6'4". He has been out of the league for a few years. He looks like he could destroy me with his pinky. I mean, this guy's massive guy.
Yeah, he's intimidating when you pass him in the hall, that's for sure.
So do you think goaltending is still in your future? Would you ever want to be a coach or a scout or something related to that? Or do you like being behind the scenes?
You know what? I haven't thought too much about that. Like I've always, in the summers, that was always kind of my side thing was I did goalie coaching, and I do like the Gretzky Hockey School. I'll help out with them and coach the goalies whenever I get an opportunity there. And it's definitely fun for me to kind of shape and mold the young kids and the next generation of goaltending. And it's fun to pass down the knowledge that I've accumulated, the things that work, the things that didn't work for me, and just use all that experience that I have. It's definitely cool. And and I love working with kids. But to say what's in my future, I can't really say for sure right now. I'm kind of taking it one step at a time.
So let's say tomorrow someone approaches you and with your dream job. Well, what is Jude Hull's dream job? Is it hockey related? Is it something totally out of left field? I mean, do you want to be a professional juggler? I don't know. What does Jude Hull dream of? What kind of dream job would you want?
That is a good question. It's definitely not hockey. It doesn't have anything to do with hockey. I'm a fan of the sport, but at the end of the day, I think there are other things that probably are calling my name. And things that I'm a little more passionate about in the workspace, I'd say.
Like what?
I'm a huge video game nerd. It'd be cool to get into video game development, something along those lines. I've always grown up loving movies and TV shows. Like getting behind the production of something like that would I think would be right up my alley. But again, like I went to school for economics, so I really don't know what I really like to do in that field. But those have always been my biggest interests growing up, and everyone that knew me would always tell me I should grow up to be a movie director. So maybe somewhere in the distant future that's there for me. But right now I'm just kind of, like I said, taking one step at a time and kind of just going to look at the opportunities that are presented and go from there.
Here's a shameless plug. You can get your master's here at Syracuse if you wanted to. We have one of the best programs for journalism and for television, radio, and film. So if you wanted to get into the field, here's a little very shameless plug. For my school, because I'm in love with it and it's a great program. So if you ever were interested in being a director or being a producer or one of those things, then hey, we're here. We're not going anywhere.
All right, that's in my back pocket.
So you said you like video games. So did you ever consider maybe jumping on the streaming on Twitch thing and just doing and just playing video games and streaming, or is it just kind of that thing where that you just do on the side and just kind of like a hobby for you?
No, like to be honest, I didn't really know what Twitch was until like Fortnite came around. It's always just been something I've done on the side. I don't think I'd be the best streamer. I'm kind of an awkward social guy, so I like playing the video games in the privacy of my own room.
That's fair. So, well then you say you like video games, but what is something that people don't know about you?
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that question. Something that nobody knows about me. It's a really good. I'm kind of a. So I grew up with two sisters, so I'm kind of on the more feminine side of things. Like I'm just a neat freak. I try and be as cleanly as possible. I don't know. Growing up with my two sisters and my mom, it kind of just that OCD cleaning kind of grew on me a little bit. So I'm an ultra clean freak, but that's kind of something that if you live with me, you knew about. What else? I'm kind of a softie. I love like the sad shows, the rom-coms, any good tearjerker movie. Those really get to me. I don't know. I don't really think I have anything like ultra secret that I've been keeping from the world.
The goalie loves the rom-coms. That's incredible.
Yeah, right now I'm into This Is Us, and man, that's tough to watch without a couple tears leaking out.
That's honestly, that's awesome. I can't say anything about that. That is. So you are going to the Islanders game. You told me before we were texting, and you are saying this is the first time you've seen the Islanders play, besides on a TV screen, of course. And what are you looking forward to in that game, besides the obvious Crosby and Kessel and Malkin and all that? And whenever you're at a game, what's something that really captures your eye? What's something that you kind of cling on to and you look with a keener eye than you would anything else?
Yeah. So I'm actually going into this game with a couple of things in mind. You hear about how Barclays Center is made for basketball and not hockey, so
Right.
I'm excited to see what the hell people are actually talking about. When it comes to personnel on the ice, I'm really looking forward to Matt Barzal. He's an exciting player to watch, and I'm looking forward to that. And obviously, Sid, he's kind of the main reason that I really wanted to go to the game. Haven't seen him play live before, so it's going to be cool seeing him. And being a goalie, Matt Murray's one of the more technically sound goalies that I've seen, and so I always find that a little therapeutic to watch. But something else that I kind of pay attention to that I don't know if many people do, but I like to get a feel for the crowd, the home ice advantage. Like I love comparing that to other arenas that I've been to, because just growing up in Minnesota, there's always this home ice advantage talk being thrown around, and I actually have grown up hating the Wild, so I never agreed with it. So I'd always compare it to other teams, and so that's just something I always pay attention to, whether the crowd is actively engaged throughout the game, or if they're kind of one of those crowds that just kind of wait for the moments that you obviously are going to get excited for. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
You mentioned something that caught my attention. You said Matt Murray is one of the more technically sound goalies in the league. So judging by that, I really want to know now what your top 5 goalie in the NHL list is. Now that you said that, I am very interested to know what your top 5 is.
All right. I got to think about this for a second. My number one's Carey Price, hands down. Everyone's talking about how bad of a year he had last year, but like that team in front of him was just not good. So everything is just completely magnified by 100 because of if he had one bad game, it's even worse with that team in front of him. So I still think Carey Price is the unanimous number one goalie in the league. Who else would be a good top 4 goalie?
Can I plug the old King of New York real quick, or is that not in your top 5?
No, I don't think Hank's there anymore. I'd say Vasilevsky for sure. I think Hellebuck. So that's 3. Everyone talks about Pecorine, but I just don't. I've never seen it. I think he's not good enough when it matters in the playoffs, and that really to me is the key to being a great goalie.
You're reading my mind here. Have you listened to my show before? Because that's exactly what I've been saying about Pecorine every time Nashville comes up. They're very good in the regular season, and then when Pecorine is in between the pipes when it matters, in the final against Pittsburgh, you couldn't stop a beach ball. Against the Jets, he was pulled 3 times. I mean, when it matters, Pecorine cannot step up, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so I think he had a great regular season, and you can very well argue that it was a Vezina Trophy season, but I just think there are plenty of other goalies I'd rather have. I think Braden Holtby, and then I think John Gibson. I think John Gibson, honestly, might be number 2, to be honest.
Wow.
He is so good in front of it, or behind a team that is so not good. He's seeing, I think, the most shots out of any goalie in the NHL right now. And yeah, I'm looking at it right now. He's almost a 940 save percentage. So it's been like that for years now. So I think he hasn't gotten the recognition that he's really has earned in his last couple seasons. So they're my top 5 goalies for you.
So take me around the league then. What are some storylines that have caught your eye, that have caught your attention? What are some things that are going on around the league that have piqued your interest?
I think the biggest thing for me, so I like growing up watching my dad in that era. So I'm kind of I don't know if you'd call it a hockey purist, but I kind of have that love for the old school, that old school game. And now that everyone's kind of developed and grown into a speed no hitting fan of the game like that, I kind of see the trend with a lot of people either disliking it or loving it. And I'm kind of more on the side of I love fighting. I think it absolutely has a place in the game has a place in the game. I think there's a lot of things that are going right with the league, and I obviously understand the direction they're going with. But like I said, growing up watching my dad in that era, it's it's tough to see some good hits being dealt suspensions, and I just think it's not to use my words, but to coin it, the league's going a little soft, and you could say that about a couple other leagues too. But yeah, I think that's just the biggest thing I've been paying attention to within the NHL.
Well, I think big hits, I mean, I'll disagree with you a little bit on that. Big hits are still around, but in the case of someone like Tom Wilson, who all he does is pretty much headhunt people, you can't do that in today's NHL. You got away with it back then, but what you saw was more players got concussions because of it, and it wasn't called back then, but it's just this. I think that the hits are. I mean, there's less hits than there were before, but the biggest hits are, as long as they're clean, then they're fine. But if you go into a hit with intent to injure or intent to headhunt or pull that elbow a little too high, then I mean the game has changed. You're right, but I would argue that it has changed a little bit, to the benefit of the player more than anything else, because the head is such a sensitive thing. The skull is tough, but the brain inside is moving around. So if you get hit there one too many times, it's devastating. So I'll disagree with you a little bit there, just because concussions are such a thing that all sports are now taking much more seriously than they did, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I get where you're coming from. I understand your point of view, but I do think that it's for the benefit of the players in the long term. If they kind of say, you can hit as much as you want, just don't bash someone's skull. I feel like that's a pretty good medium for both. It's a good compromise, because no one's taking away hitting, no one's taking away fighting. Fighting is kind of being fizzled out, but at the end of the day, the game is so fast now that if you can't skate as quickly, or if you're just there to be a bodyguard and not score, at the end of the day, you could fight as many people as you want, but you're not going to win a game because you fought more. You're going to win the game by scoring more goals, which is how the league is nowadays. It's always been that way. You kind of have to score more to win games, but more so now than anything else. The bottom six for teams have to be speedy players that know what to do with the puck once they get it. Back let's say 10, 20, 30 years, you got guys that would score maybe once in a season, if that, because they weren't out there to score. They were out there to be a bodyguard.
Oh yeah, and I'm certainly not advocating like hits to the head, right. The most recent Tom Wilson hit. It's just like, it's so hard at that speed. I know, and like going into it, I saw tweets and responses from ex-players with tweets saying like the kid shouldn't have been skating to the center of the ice with his head down, which I certainly agree with. But then I also am saying, like, why is Tom Wilson even going in for that hit in the last preseason game? And so I certainly understand the league kind of taking that into their hands and saying this. It needs to stop. And I certainly understand everything else that you said. It was more along the lines of people getting up in arms about any kind of hit, really. From my point of view, I think people are upset about hitting and fighting, which fighting realistically does not lead towards more concussions. And have you seen the movie Ice Guardians?
I believe I have, maybe a while ago. I don't remember much of it. If I have, I think I did see it. I'm pretty sure I did.
So it's basically about the role of the enforcer in the NHL, and actually like Kevin Westgarth is a big part of it, and my dad's in it, and it's just it's a lot of these enforcers kind of discussing their role and how they feel the need for it still in the league. which I certainly don't feel that it's to that degree. I still think it is a necessary evil, though, is if you want to keep your superstar safe. And that, one of the talking points in the movie is when Sidney Crosby was taking those just beatings after beatings. Like, I don't think anyone would go near him if Sid had a Tony Twist on the bench. Like, no one would even blink an eye about going to hit Sidney Crosby if they had to risk fighting Tony Twist or a Kelly Chase or a Bob Probert. But again, this is totally me and my me watching my dad in that era. So I know it's an old fashioned way of thinking, and it's certainly probably a little out of date, but I like to play a little devil's advocate for those that really know me well. So I like to argue whenever I can.
I mean, that's a fair point. There are good points on both sides to that argument. But as a Rangers fan, I watched Tanner Glass for more than I would have liked to on the Rangers ice. Alain Vigneault played him a little too much for my liking, but that's neither here nor there. But Tanner Glass, was supposed to be that quote unquote fighter for the Rangers, and that didn't really happen, if at all. I mean, that might have been in the back of some players' heads occasionally, but I mean, Tanner Glass is a solid fighter, but not much else. On the ice anyway. I'm sure he's a great individual off the ice, and I don't have anything bad to say about him, but he doesn't not known for his goal scoring ability, except for scoring the first goal of the playoffs a couple of years ago against Carey Price when he went top shelf. That was the most ridiculous goal I've ever seen from Tanner Glass or from anybody like Tanner Glass ever. Besides, I mean, the only comparison that I can think of for that goal is when Mike Rupp scored 2 goals in the Winter Classic against the Flyers in 2010, I think it was. I mean, that's the closest I can think to an enforcer type scoring these crazy goals.
Ryan Reeves had some nice goals in the playoffs in the last playoffs.
Ryan Reeves, the thing, like, they kind of waned him off of being an enforcer and kind of put him into a bottom 6 role, which is Gerard Gallant. I mean, he's done some great things in Vegas. He turned Derek Engelland into a solid top 4 defenseman, which before going to Vegas, he did not look like a top 4 defenseman. And then he went to Vegas, and then through Gallant became a much a stable defenseman on that blue line. And Ryan Reeves came from St. Louis to Vegas and then looked like a better all around player as opposed to being in St. Louis, where he was kind of sort of the quasi enforcer on that team. So even though he still kind of is on Vegas, from what I've seen out of him in St. Louis versus in Vegas, he kind of looks like he knows more. He has more of a sense of what to do with the puck, where the puck is, how to score goals. It might just be an entire, just an eye test, whatever thing. It might not be true at all, but that's what it seems like to me. So when you have a player, that bottom 6 needs to be able to produce goals. At the end of the day, when your top line isn't producing, or if your second line isn't doing as well as you want them to be, those bottom 6, your bottom 6 are going to be the players that are going to bail those guys out when they need to be bailed out. And if you have guys on that bottom 6 that can't score, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think in the case of Ryan Reeves, I think it was more of his environment around him. That St. Louis team he was traded from was kind of built on their big. They weren't the fastest team by any means. They were all physicality, and so when he was traded to Vegas, I think he kind of had to evolve or kind of die out of the league. And I think he's done a great job at evolving and kind of keeping up with that speedy roster that he's surrounded with. But no, I absolutely agree with the importance of the bottom 6 role and their need for scoring. I'm seeing it right now with my favorite team, the Stars. They aren't really getting a lot out of their depth guys, and it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, what are the questions I was going to ask you? You know, what your favorite team was, because you know your dad played for so many, your grandpa played for so many. You moved around a little bit. I was going to ask, you know, what your favorite team was, but I'm glad you answered that for me with the Dallas Stars. So what are you looking for from the Stars this season? Then you got Ben Bishop, you got some good names, but they haven't been able to produce any huge wins so far. What do you see out of the Stars this season?
I'm seeing a lot of similar years past. I think they rely so heavily, arguably more heavily than any other team on their first line. If Ben, Sagan, and now Radulov don't produce, you might as well just chalk it up as a loss. In the past couple of games, they've actually been getting a good score or good production from their other guys. But story of the season so far, from my point of view, is that if you shut down Ben and Sagan, it's you might as well just chalk that up as a win for you.
So let's say you are the new general manager of the Stars tomorrow. What would be the first thing that you do to in your eyes fix the Dallas Stars?
Well, and I can't go back in time and make different decisions. I would say I don't know. 2 weeks ago, I would have said I'd buy out Jason Spezza's contract and go for a younger, more reliable forward. But he's actually been one of their more reliable guys this year, so it's kind of hard to say anything negative about him. I think they just need another top centerman. As good as Jason Spezza is, he's not quick enough to play in the league. His hands are still there. It's just his foot speed doesn't really. He can't keep up with a number 2 center role in this league.
Well, he is 35. He has a $7.5 million cap hit until the end of this season. So let's say Spezza resigns, I don't know, at a $1 million for a 1-year deal, and he slots into that third line center. Then the Stars don't have too much cap space. They have 1.6 around right now, according to Cap Friendly, of course, the site that I use literally every episode. They have 1.6 right now. Let's say the cap, goes up, I don't know, $3 million. So their cap space is around 4 and you take away the 6.5 from Spezza's contract, you make it a $1 million. So let's say the Stars have around $10-11 million in cap space. They need to re-sign Jan Mark and Brett Ritchie and Gamel Smith and Esa Lindell as well. Is that enough? What would you do to find that second line center? Would it be a trade? Would you try to find some space and sign a free agent? Then what would you do as the general manager of the Dallas Stars to find a second line center?
I honestly don't know off the top of my head the impending free agents for next summer, so I can't say with certainty there. But I would say make a trade, make an off-season signing, but I would avoid trading. Actually, I'd say sign someone in the off-season. They've got good young players in their farm system, but they just need that one more reliable second line center. And even maybe to split up that top 3, that big 3 line, and just provide a little more secondary scoring, and maybe not even secondary, more primary scoring, because you see what the Leafs did with John Tavares now. So just to keep up with other teams in the league, I think you need to make a big splash at that center position.
The biggest names to be at the center position, to be free agents at the end of this year, besides Jason Spezza, obviously, Matt Duchene is going to be a UFA. Joe Pavelski as well. So Derek Brassard as well. So these 3 guys who, Duchene's 28, Brassard's 32, Pavelski's 35. Matt Duchene might be your best option. He makes $6 million right now. I don't know how much he would want after this season. I mean, he has 11 points in 10 games so far, so he's doing well in Ottawa. But Matt Duchene obviously makes any team better. How about Duchene in a Stars jersey? What do you think about that?
He would definitely fit the mold with the other players on that roster, with the speedy, highly skilled forward. But honestly, it's a guessing game on who would mesh well with a roster. You kind of have to that's more on the insider side of the thing, and making sure that the players are into it, making sure that they can develop a relationship with him. So obviously, as a fan, I don't think many people would hate having Matt Duchene on their team unless you're Colorado. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be opposed to adding someone like Matt Duchene.
For sure. So, what do you think about Ben Bishop then? What's your opinion on Ben Bishop? Obviously, you're a goalie. You watch him. You watch his how he is as a technical goalie on his technical side. You see how he plays on a regular basis. What's your opinion on Ben Bishop's ability to be that goalie to carry a team to the postseason? What can he do that? Is he capable of not only carrying a team to the playoffs, but carrying them deep into the playoffs? Is he capable of doing that, or do the Stars need to find someone else?
Well, he's obviously capable. He's been to the finals with Tampa.
Right.
From what I've seen so far with him in Dallas, though, he's just too inconsistent for me. He'll post 2 great games, and then I'll watch him, and it looks like he's not even trying. So it's kind of that. Like you see these guys who are winning cups, like the Braden Holtby. Even when he's getting lit up, it looks like he's 100% in the game. He's focused, and I think that is one of the biggest things you can do as a goaltender is have great body language and just ensure your team that you aren't nothing's getting in your head. You're not getting rattled. And I think Ben Bishop might have the worst body language in the league in terms of getting scored on and immediately giving it to a defenseman or kind of just throwing his hands up in the air in that sense. So I'd like to see that improve out of him, but like I said, he's perfectly capable of getting you to the finals. It's just a matter of his effort level, I guess.
I have a name that I might disagree with you a little bit on, him being the worst at body language. I think he might be up there, but I cannot stand Craig Anderson when he's in net. I truly can't. Whenever there's a cross crease pass, he's never at that other side of the net. He just, the way that Craig Anderson plays, I mean, he will make some big saves here and there, but he will never stretch more than he feels like he should. He's never quick on the puck when there's a pass or when there's a rebound. Craig Anderson, a play that I have ingrained in my head is when I can't remember which game this was or what year this was, but this was against the Rangers. It was Craig Anderson was on his blocker side post, and then the puck went from that side to the other side, and the net was empty. Craig Anderson, the only thing that he did was stretch his glove out. He didn't move. He didn't stretch his pad or try to get across. All he did was kind of stretch his left arm in the hopes of catching the puck when the 4x6 is pretty much open for him for the shooter. Craig Anderson, definitely one of those players that the body language just it really bothers me. But Craig Anderson is definitely a goalie that I can't figure out why. You work so hard to be in the best league in the world, right? And to do something like that, or to do something like Ben Bishop, like you were saying a little earlier, I don't get it. I would kill to be in the NHL. That's a dream for me, to make it that far and to just kind of not give your all on every shift. It's just, I don't know, it bothers me.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something you see with the goalies out. Like I said, the goalies that are going deep in the playoffs every year and having great success are the ones that are busting their balls to make every possible save. And when it's as obvious as like Craig Anderson and Ben Bishop are making it out, I don't know. You just don't have the highest of hopes.
You're absolutely right, Jude. This has been absolutely incredible. You are the best. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Tell everyone where they should follow you on social media, what kind of plans you got going on, where should people keep an eye out for you?
Well, it's my pleasure, Andrew. It was awesome being a part of this, and I look forward to your future episodes, and hopefully I can join you again in the future. With social media, you can just find me at Instagram. It's just Jude Hull. I think Twitter, it's Hey Jude 35 or something. I don't know. But future plans, it's up in the air right now. Just kind of grinding it out in New York, and who knows what's next for me. I'd definitely say I'm a Midwest guy, so I wouldn't be opposed to heading back there in the future. And obviously Minnesota is, as you speak to any Minnesotan, nothing is better than Minnesota. You won't find you won't find more state pride in any other state. Minnesotans just they embrace the cold. They love their hockey. The most friendly state, most beautiful state. So I'm obviously talking to you as a Minnesotan, as a very biased person there, but no, to any of your listeners who have never been, I'd highly suggest maybe going for the Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament. It's a great experience, and it's a great, beautiful state to have. I've been fortunate enough to live in.
I've pretty much been my entire life has been on the East Coast. I've never been past, I don't think, Pennsylvania to my knowledge. So let's say I go to Minnesota one day. What's the first thing I should do? Well,
I think most Minnesotans would get mad at me for saying this, but obviously the Mall of America it's quite the spectacle. It's massive.
Yeah.
So seeing that, it's awesome. Like I said, like if you're there during the Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament, the attendance that tournament gets is mind blowing. It's Texas for high school football. You know, they're selling out the XL Energy Center.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. So that if you're a hockey fan, if you're fortunate enough to be there during that time, I'd say that's a for sure thing you got to do. Just explore Minneapolis. Minneapolis and St. Paul. They're beautiful cities, and you won't be bored in that city. There's always things to do.
For sure. Jude, you are welcome on this show literally anytime you want. Just let me know. Anytime you want to come on, I will make room for you. You're always welcome, and I just really appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Absolutely. That was Jude Hull, of course, on the special 20th episode of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and I'll talk to you again next week.